Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the American Revolution, looking at its origins and maybe the tougher realities behind how the nation actually started.
Yeah, we've got quite a pile of material here. Articles, research notes, even a transcript.
Right. And our goal really is to unpack what kicked it all off, what those very first moments looked like, and why the ideas from that time, both the big ideals and, frankly, the flaws, still matter so much to you today.
Okay, so digging in. The sources make it pretty clear these tensions didn't just pop up in 1775. They'd been building for years.
Absolutely. You had the British Crown, pretty deep in debt after the Seven Years' War,
hmm
and they started leaning on the colonies with heavy taxes,
hmm
things like the Stamp Act, taxing paper goods, and of course the Tea Act.
And that's where we see that huge rallying cry emerge in the sources. No taxation without representation. It really caught fire.
It did. But what's striking in the documents is that Parliament didn't just, debate it. They responded with more force.
Yeah, and things got particularly intense, didn't they? By 1775, the sources described the mood, especially around Boston, as beyond estranged.
It wasn't just about the taxes anymore, was it?
No, not at all. Britain had sent thousands of soldiers to occupy Boston. And then you had the Intolerable Acts, stripping Massachusetts of its power to govern itself. That felt like a direct attack.
A humiliation, the notes suggest, a real threat to their basic way of life.
And that whole powder keg well, it went off on April 19, 1775. British troops march out of Boston, heading for Concord,
About 18 miles out, yeah. Their goal was to seize the militia's weapons and supplies.
which the British authorities considered an act of treason, stockpiling arms like that.
And our notes mention something interesting. Halfway there is Lexington, and that's where Sam Adams and John Hancock were hiding out, lying low.
Right. Paul Revere's ride wasn't just a general alarm. He specifically went to warn them. Apparently, Hancock wanted to stay and fight initially.
But Adams persuaded him they were more valuable organizing things elsewhere. Smart move, probably.
Probably. So Adams and Hancock get away. But back on Lexington Green, at sunrise, you've got about 77 Patriot militia facing down this column of British regulars.
And that first shot, we still don't definitively know who fired it, do we?
No, the sources are divided or unclear, but the result is clear. It went badly for the militia. They scattered pretty quickly. 8 were killed.
Which, for a small, tight-knit community like Lexington, was just devastating. The sources talk about a terrible toll, a wave of grief.
And word spread like wildfire. That phrase, "they've killed our people in Lexington," you can just imagine how that riled people up.
Absolutely infuriated them. Militia started turning out everywhere.
Which leads us to Concord later that same morning. Now you've got over 400 Minutemen gathered at the North Bridge.
And again, the sources mostly say the British fired first. That's when Major Buttrick shouts that order.
Fire, for God's sake, fire. Just incredible.
And the sources stress how huge that was. The first time a colonial officer actually ordered his men to fire on the king's soldiers.
And it was effective there. The British took significant casualties, they broke ranks, they retreated from the bridge.
Then came that long, brutal march back to Boston. 18 miles.
With colonists taking shots at them the whole way, using cover, trees, stone walls.
Total nightmare for the British regulars. Used to open field battles. The documents definitely call it a humiliation.
So after that day, April 19th, what really changed, the sources are unanimous on this. Any idea that this could be settled peacefully? Gone.
Yeah, the world they knew had just vanished. There was, like the sources say, no turning back.
And the very next month, you get the Second Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia.
And they appoint George Washington to lead this new Continental Army. The war was officially on.
And the sources track that war 8 long, hard years. It paints a picture of the colonies having the sense of purpose.
Against Britain's advantages, the big army, the powerful navy, more resources.
You see key moments highlighted. Bunker Hill, technically a British win, but a huge morale boost for the Americans.
Showed they could stand and fight. Then Saratoga in 77.
That was the game changer, wasn't it? Convinced France to come in on the American side, made it a global conflict.
Right. And finally, Yorktown in 1781. Cornwallis surrenders.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the end of the fighting.
But the sources also really emphasize the other war happening alongside the military one.
The ideological one. Yeah. 1776, the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson's words.
All men are created equal. Governments deriving power from the consent of the governed.
I mean, in a world of kings and divine right, that was, well, one source calls it a philosophical earthquake. Truly radical stuff.
It really was. And just a quick clarification one source makes distinguishing this historical revolution from that much later controversial 1915 film, The Birth of a Nation. Different eras, different conflicts.
Good point. So, the war officially wraps up in 1783, the Treaty of Paris. Britain formally recognizes the United States.
So taking all this research, all these sources, what's the takeaway? Well, they show the American Revolution sent shockwaves globally. It inspired other movements.
Definitely. But the sources are also really clear, and this is crucial, that the nation's birth was, quote, far from perfect.
Yeah, you have this Declaration of Freedom, but slavery continues, even grows.
All men are created equal. But as the documents note, that vision didn't initially include women, or indigenous peoples, or the enslaved Africans who made up a huge part of the population.
So why does this history still hit home for you today? There's a line in one source about people coming here to avoid having someone else's boot on your neck.
That core idea, right, freedom from oppression, beyond all the divisions we see now, the sources suggest that fundamental desire is what America was supposed to be about.
Exactly. The revolution lit a fire. It wasn't just about battles, it was about belief. Ordinary people taking enormous risks for an idea.
Which leaves us with something to think about, pulled from these materials.
Yeah.
How do we hold those incredible, groundbreaking ideals of the Declaration alongside the really stark imperfections and exclusions that were there right at the beginning? What does that tension born from that fight centuries ago mean for how you see things today?